either in the book of Revelation itself, sometimes in the same chapter it'll explain it, or it'll be explained somewhere else in the Bible. So a concordance should always be a good concordance right by your arm when you study the book of Revelation. So you look up the word see and see how it is used in a figurative way. Well, Isaiah uses it in a figurative way. He says the nations are like the sea that constantly are tossed by the winds and the waves. In Revelation chapter 17, verse 15, it says, and the waters on which the whore sits, the waters are peoples and nations and tribes and tongues, etc. In other words, waters and sea are used as a symbol of the nations. So it's simply saying this beast comes up out of the nations. And it says that he has, all of these familiar symbols. And then it says, and the beast which I saw was like a leopard. Now that's the overall appearance of this beast was like a leopard. And it says, and his feet were like those of a bear, and his mouth like the mouth of a lion. And the dragon gave him his power, his throne, and great authority. Now, if you plan to be here during this time, you should be trembling and shaking at what it says here. Because this is announcing the most horrifying thing that'll ever hit this planet. The symbol of this great empire is the beast with 10 horns and 7 heads. That's the symbol. We'll learn about that in a minute. But the beast that he describes in verse 2 it's describing the form that this takes in the last days. He saw its outer appearance was like a leopard, its feet were like a bear, its mouth like a mouth of a lion, and the dragon gave it its power. Okay. If you look in Daniel chapter 2, don't do it now, but do it later, you'll find that the first revelation of these 4 successive world empires that God gave was in a dream that Babylonian king Nebuchadnezzar had, and Daniel interpreted it. And you'll find that the leopard was a symbol of the 3rd kingdom, which was Greece, that the bear was a symbol of the 2nd kingdom, which was Media-Persia, and the lion was a symbol of Babylon. So it's saying that this final form of world power has some characteristics of all of these great empires of the past. And as you look at these symbols to try to understand what the Lord is trying to tell us here, well, you can see even by the historical way these kingdoms moved in history, you can see what kind of characteristics this kingdom that's coming is going to have. And listen, we're not talking about something far off. Don't get bogged down by the symbols. We're talking about something that is forming in Europe right now. So don't think this is dusty old history or a bunch of screwball symbols. This has to do with you and your world right now. So when he uses the symbol leopard, as it's used, it's a symbol of cunning, speed, stealth, deadly mobility. And that's exactly the way Alexander the Great moved his army. He was always outnumbered. When he beat the Medo-Persians, he was outnumbered 20-1. He absolutely destroyed them. He moved like a leopard, with the speed and agility of a leopard, with the stealth of a leopard, with the deadly mobility of moving troops into weak points and things like that. And that great army that was had the strength of a ponderous bear couldn't withstand it. And yet, when Media-Persia took over in their initial takeover, the symbol of them being a bear was a ponderous, crushing power. And that they had, the zenith of their empire. So it not only is going to have cunning and stealth and speed, this empire will also have ponderous, crushing power. And when it says it'll have a mouth like a lion, a mouth like a lion's mouth is one of the strongest parts of this whole body, and they're powerful all over. But the mouth of a lion can rip things asunder. I mean, it's deadly. Once a lion gets his mouth on you, you're gone. And so that was a characteristic of Babylon. They were a great power in their zenith. So it's saying that this empire is going to have all of these characteristics. All right, then it says, and the dragon, it switches from, and here's one of the things that I noticed, that it's been something that's bothered me all the time. I've studied this for 40 years. And I really came to terms with the Lord. I said, look, I want to know exactly what does this mean. And then the Lord showed me what had been the pressure all along. You see, we have two things described here. We have the empire or the kingdom described, and we also have the person of the Antichrist described side by side. And it's easy to confuse one with the other. As a matter of fact, a lot of time great expositors say, well, this is really not talking about a person. It's talking about a kingdom, about the deadly wound. It's symbolically talking about the disappearance of the empire and then the empire being miraculously brought back. Well, that's true. It is. But it's also talking about a man who will be mortally wounded and put to death and brought back. So the empire and the man have the same kind of phenomenon. Now, how do we know that then it is a man? Well, hold your place here and turn with me to Revelation 19, verse 20. This is what Jesus does after he comes back. It says in 19, verse 20, and the beast was seized, and with him the false prophet, we'll talk about him next week, who performed the signs, miraculous signs in his presence, by which he deceived those who had received the mark of the beast and those who worshipped his image. These two were thrown alive into the lake of fire. All right, you can't throw a kingdom alive into a lake of fire. It's an individual. So here are two individuals, the beast and the false prophet, that are thrown alive into the lake of fire. So we know that this is also has to be talking about an individual. And when it describes the empire in the first part of verse 2, but it describes the individual in the second part. And then it begins to describe the individual down through the rest of the context. All right, look again now. Revelation 13, verse 2, last half of that verse. And the dragon gave him. You'll see this word gave, all the way through this context, and that's very important. And the dragon gave him. Him refers to the Antichrist. His power. In other words, whose power does he give the Antichrist? His power. In other words, whose power does he give the Antichrist? Satan gives him his own power. So, dragon. How do we know dragon means Satan? Revelation chapter 12. Just give you, we won't look up all of these every time, but I'll give you a lesson in how to understand the book of Revelation. Revelation chapter 12, verse 9. And the great dragon was thrown down, the serpent of old, who is called the devil and Satan, who deceives the whole world. He was thrown down to the earth, and his angels were thrown down with him. All right, so there it shows the dragon is who? Satan. All right. So let's put it in reality. Satan gave him his power. And this is the word dunamis. It's a word for personal power.